Hello and welcome to episode 98 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Devin Dundee. I'm joined as always by my co-host, Sigmund Judge. Sigmund, how are your Thanksgiving preparations going?
Dreadfully, Devin. Dreadfully. So, funnily enough, this is a holiday that I actually do celebrate in my own kind of way. In some ways, I adopted this holiday as my own. Normally this week, I would be flying out to Vienna to see family. Unfortunately, this time, I'm not cleared to fly due to a couple of medical goings on. So I'm a little bit bummed out about that, but I'm very much looking forward to watching lots and lots of movies and television this week. What are your plans for Thanksgiving?
Well, in my family, Thanksgiving, of course, is a big deal. We've got lots of different dinners planned. I think I've got 3 or 4 Thanksgivings that I'm going to be attending over the next week or so. So we're going to be all over the place, but lots of good family time and great food, which is always wonderful. And a little bit of time off work too as well, which I'm never going to complain about. So looking forward to the holiday and celebrating with family. And I'm glad that you'll be able to celebrate in your own way as well.
I've got to ask very quickly, is there a family member that you're going to see that you might want to say good afternoon to this coming week?
Not that I would say on a podcast, Sigmund. Let's just say that much. Of course, what you're referring to is our favorite Apple original Christmas film, Spirited, which has a big release this week. But before we get to that, we've got lots coming up on the show. We're going to preview a series of articles that you've been working on, Sigmund, around Apple TV and Home Assistant. We're going to dig into the latest on Vision OS and spatial video news. Look forward to Ridley Scott's Napoleon and the new look. But we're going to start with our highlight of the week, the monstrous Apple original series, Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. After surviving Godzilla's attack on San Francisco, Kate is shaken yet again by a shocking secret. Amid monstrous threats, she embarks on a globetrotting adventure to learn the truth about her family and the mysterious organization known as Monarch.
Monarch was there in San Francisco, taking pictures like they'd been waiting for it.
You think that your father was working for them?
The world is on fire.
These monsters and Monarch have taken everything from me.
If you want to save millions of lives, we can use some help.
So this highly anticipated series from Legendary Television stars Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell as Lee Shaw, Anna Sawai as Kate Randa, Kiersey Clemens as May, Ren Watabe as Kentaro, Mari Yamamoto as Keiko, Anders Holm as Bill Randa, Joe Tippett as Tim, and Elisa Lisowski as Duval. This positions itself in the Monsterverse chronology, which starts in 1915 and goes all the way through to 2016. It puts itself between the films Kong Island and Skull Island, and then Godzilla King of Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Godzilla Kong The New Empire. Lots of people have been looking forward to this. I know, especially those that are really into the mythology of the Monsterverse and Monarch. So lots to dig into here. But Devin, you're a newcomer to the Monsterverse. What's it been like entering this world through Monarch: Legacy of Monsters?
I have to say, Sigmund, it's been a lot of fun. I was a little nervous. You just gave a list of all the different films and I think one TV show that's already gone into the Monsterverse so far, and we're jumping into the middle of it here. But honestly, I found it very approachable and easy to get into. Godzilla is a creature that's really a part of the cultural zeitgeist. Of course, we all know about Godzilla and what it is, but having never personally actually seen a Godzilla film, it was fun to see a story from Godzilla's world start to unfold. And so I found it very fun. If you're not a huge fan of the Monsterverse, but you're interested in seeing this show, I would say it's a good entry point. And I imagine there will be more people like me who use this as the starting point, but then jump into the films. And I think there's a new one, Godzilla Kong New Empire, that's coming next year, right? So
yeah, and Then you have like something that is completely away from the MonsterVerse called Godzilla Zero, I think, which is also coming to cinemas, but again, a different universe.
Well, it is cool, though, how sort of laid out this particular iteration of Godzilla is. I didn't realize how just straightforward the timeline is and how really connected all these different properties are. And that very first scene of the series when we see John Goodman on Skull Island, I did not realize that he was actually playing a character from one of the films, and that his character, Bill Randa, is actually one of the main characters on this series, but he's played in a younger version. I also found the central story really compelling and easy to jump into. We start off with Kate, who's a survivor of G-Day, which is the Godzilla attack on San Francisco that we saw in the film Godzilla. She travels to Tokyo trying to track down her dad, who disappeared shortly after the attack. And she finds not her father, but his other family, including a half-brother that she didn't know existed, Kentaro. Together, they go rummaging through their dad's things and find files with a Monarch insignia that are hidden in his office. And that eventually leads them to Lee Shaw, a former associate of the organization. And that's how the central plot of the story kicks off. But it's also got an element, like I said, of a young Bill Randa back in the early days of Monarch. So we also get to see Lee Shaw played not only in the current timeline by Kurt Russell, but also in the past by his son, Wyatt Russell. And it's really cool to get to see this character at different points in his life. Wyatt's the young, earnest, all-American guy. He's got a little bit of a rough edge. He has a black eye when we meet him, just to kind of, give him a little bit of that extra toughness. But he's really all in. And then we see Kurt Russell playing this jaded, washed-up retiree who's seen it all, right? It's a really cool contrast. And it's awesome, that we get to see this father-son pair playing the same character at such different points in his life.
One of the things that I found out this week during the press run, which I thought was really, really interesting, was how Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell were talking about how they studied each other in terms of their acting and what they were bringing to screen for the character. And I thought that was really, really interesting to see how their process would be approaching it as father and son, which is a rarity in this world. Kurt Russell brings a really special energy to the screen, and it's so nice to see him in a production this big and with this much exposure. So really, really cool. Of course, we do have the people, but this is a MonsterVerse series.
That's true, and as important as the people are in this series, what a lot of people are going to be watching for, of course, is the monsters. And you don't have to worry about that. Even though this is a series rather than a film, there's plenty of monster action to go around. I think that one thing that people really like to see in these kinds of universes is a good balance between the humor-centered plot and the big action sequences, here specifically with the Titans. And so that's a narrow line to walk, but I feel like at least based on these premiere episodes that we've seen, I think there's a really good balance of both within these first two episodes.
Yeah, I think there's also an interesting balance here between modern day and the past, and they're both depicted in very kind of different styles, right? The modern day elements are very dark and brooding, whilst the flashback storylines are very fun, very adventurous, almost like a hark back to the old action adventure tropes that we saw with like Indiana Jones and the Journey films and maybe even the Mummy films as well. Now, I was a little bit concerned with this story taking place in so many different areas, because it reminded me of another sci-fi show that I didn't quite get to grips with on Apple TV Plus. This, however, I think is able to get that balance perfect, and the strands and the elements that are there's not too much going on, and therefore you're able to build a relationship with each character, especially with the older characters that we see their flashbacks, and really get to be involved in their story rather than coming in fresh with maybe 10 characters sprawled across many different locations throughout the world. saying that, I want to talk about our favourite moments from this premiere weekend.
I think you and I are leaning towards the same area of the premiere. Of course, these first two episodes go together as the big introduction of the series, and they're building towards the end of the second episode, where personally, at least my favorite part of monster movies is when the creature is finally revealed in all of its glory. You can't show the monster too early. You got to build up to it. And at the end of the second episode, we really get to see this creature that these three main characters have been chasing for the first couple of episodes. And so that's very cool. And it also just speaks to, I think, to the quality of the series, the amount of effort that's been put into it from so many different production standpoints. It just looks awesome, and it's a really fun moment during the premiere.
Yeah, ends on a fantastic set piece. Again, there's just that superb balance between that and the more grittier elements that we have seen in some of the earlier movies, because if you look at like Godzilla 2014, that was very gritty. That was very much focused on Monarch. Then you had Kong Skull Island, which got quite fantastical and was a lot of fun and more of a family film, I think. And so they've merged both elements brilliantly. Monarch's 2-episode debut is now available to stream across all of your screens on Apple TV+.
And one thing that's really excited us about this series is something that you shared earlier this year, that you heard that this series was being filmed for Spatial Video when Apple Vision Pro releases. We got some news on that this week. You want to tell us a little bit about the latest update on Monarch and Spatial Video?
Absolutely. Well, during the press run, we heard from the showrunner and the creator of the series that there was supposedly no truth to this. What I will say is I heard from multiple sources that it was happening, multiple sources that I trust. Given the release of Monarch in relation to the expected release of Apple Vision Pro, it could still happen. Or maybe something simply didn't go to plan. Maybe there was an experiment that wasn't seen all the way through. One thing is for sure though, sometimes companies prefer to stay on message with when they want to share certain news and certain releases. This also happened to me a few years ago when LG let me know that the TV app was coming to their older TVs, and then an hour later denied the fact with a public statement to 9to5Mac, only to roll out the app that they shared with me to the older range of TVs 9 months later. I'm not saying for definite that we will see Monarch come to Vision Pro, because maybe something changed, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see something in some shape or form come to Vision Pro related to this property or to the Monsterverse in general. And I'll leave it at that. I'd be surprised if this is the end to this story. Just a few months maybe to wait and see.
Right. There is a 0% chance that Apple's not doing something with Apple Originals for Apple Vision Pro to enhance the experience, whether that be bonus content, whether that be taking some of the AR content maybe that they've done for All Mankind and doing something special with that on the Apple Vision Pro. We don't know what Apple's working on, but I'm excited to see whatever it is that they have for us, because I know there's going to be something fun in the Apple Original space that they're going to do with Apple Vision Pro when it does come. It feels like we're talking about Apple Vision Pro more and more as it gets closer to release. There's just all this news coming out. Last week we talked about spatial video recording coming to the iPhone in the iOS 17.2 beta. But after we recorded last week, we got some news that select members of the press actually got a chance to record some of this footage themselves and then play it back on the Apple Vision Pro. What a cool experience that they had. And I think we had a few things we wanted to highlight from their experiences.
Yeah, I want to start off with John Gruber of Daring Fireball, who made some amazing points here. I've tried to pick the best, but honestly, I could have just read the whole article because I found it fascinating. So the first is that he believes that the limit of 1080p is because to get an image from the ultra-wide 0.5x camera, that is the equivalent field of view as from the 1x camera, it needs to crop the ultra-wide image significantly. That also means that there just isn't enough pixels to crop the 1x equivalent field of view from the center of the sensor to get that 4K image, which I thought was really interesting. He says that there are two downsides to shooting spatial video with your iPhone. First, the aforementioned 1080p resolution and 30 frames per second frame rate. He says he's been shooting 4K video by default for years because why not? He wishes, though, that he could capture spatial video at 4K, but alas, not yet. The second downside to shooting spatial video is that it effectively doubles the file size compared to non-spatial 1080p, for the obvious reason that each spatial video contains two 1080p video streams. That file size doubling is a small price to pay. The videos are still smaller than non-spatial 4K 30 frames per second video. He also says that Apple has improved and streamlined the onboarding calibration process significantly since the first Apple Vision Pro demos in June at WWDC. There are a few steps where you're presented with a series of dots in a big circle floating in front of you, like the hour indexes on a clock. As you look at each circle, it lights up a bit, and then you do the finger tap gesture. It's the Vision Pro's way to calibrate that what it thinks you're looking is what you actually are looking at. Once that calibration step was over, and it took just a minute or two, he was ready to go on the home screen of Vision OS, and the precision of this calibration is supposedly amazing. UI elements can be placed relatively close to each other, and it knows exactly which one you're looking at when you tap. iOS UI design needs to be much more forgiving of our relatively flat fingers than Vision OS UI design needs to be about the precision of our gaze, which that blew my mind. One thing I will say from other people's experiences is that one can accidentally select something by just looking at it. Maybe you're just looking around and, having a pan around, oh, what's that? And then suddenly you've selected it. So it'll be interesting to see how that's been improved also during that time. Now, Gruber also goes on to say that Apple won't come right out and say it, but he gets the feeling that all things considered, spatial video captured using Vision Pro will be better. The iPhone might win out on image quality given the fact that the 1x main camera on the iPhone 15 Pro is the single best camera system Apple makes, but the Vision Pro should win out on spatiality, the 3D-ness of it all, because Vision Pro's two lenses for spatial video capture are roughly as far apart from each other as human eyes are. The two lenses used for capture on an iPhone are of course much closer to each other than any pair of human eyes, but despite how close the two lenses are to each other, the 3D effect is very compelling on spatial video captured on an iPhone. He goes on to say that, of course, the best camera is the camera that's in your pocket, which I think we'll all agree on, and that there is a interesting effect on the video that's being captured. Overall, you get like a filmic kind of grainy experience because it's 1080p. And I thought that was really interesting because one of the concerns I think we both had in terms of reliving our memories is the effect on mental health if everything was almost too real. So I like the idea that there's like a film grain effect, so that it looks like you are actually looking at a memory and not reliving life. Very important, I think, to have that differentiation. Now, Gruber wasn't the only person to have a hands-on. What did Joanna Stern have to say over at the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, she was there as well. I think John Gruber even mentioned in his podcast Dithering that they were together for their demo. They took some spatial video in tandem. But she mentions in her newsletter the experience of watching her own spatial videos, which is a very cool experience, but also the experience of watching other people's spatial videos, because there were some pre-made ones on the Apple Vision Pro as well. And she said she felt like she was invading someone's personal private space because these are so intimate. And so I think she said she was watching like a family dinner play out, and she felt like awkward, like she wasn't really supposed to be there. And so I think that's an interesting sort of mental/emotional aspect of this as well. The primary use of this, of course, will be for your own memories, to go ahead and play back, birthday parties and moments from your life and just the people that you love. But if we end up where we're all wearing some kind of headset that can play these back and we're sharing them with each other, that might alter things a little bit. And so I thought that was an interesting point to make. And of course, you can always play these back in 2 dimensions as well at the full 1080p quality. It just won't have that same effect on it. I'll just say, Sigmund, the more I hear about this stuff, the more I feel like we're just living in the future. And it is really incredible what Apple's doing, not only with the Apple Vision Pro, which is just such an amazing looking device. I can't wait to try it myself. But using current technology, like what they've been shipping in the iPhone, to sort of move us all towards that future. Using those 2 tiny little camera sensors that are so close together, but through software and through just the image quality, the ability to create spatial videos and the memories that we're going to be able to get from that is just amazing. So it's really cool how they're using their entire product line to start pushing these technologies forward. I imagine we'll be able to capture spatial video on iPads and other devices before too long. It is just so cool to see us all moving towards this future together. I love reading about it, but it just makes me more and more excited for next year. Before or after our March dates that we picked for the Apple Vision Pro launch.
February date for you.
Oh, that's right.
March
That's right. I actually moved forward, didn't I? Thanks for reminding me. Regardless of when it comes, I think we're both in the camp. We just absolutely cannot wait to experience this thing.
I'm not too sure if the same is for you. I have started capturing everything in spatial video now. I had a really nice moment last week with my mum, and we were sat there and she was really, really chuffed because she'd bought the new Apple TV, not realizing that she had an older Apple TV. In fact, I didn't know either because I'd got her the new remote that she wanted. So she got a new Apple TV and she set it all up herself. And she was very, very proud of this fact. And while she was telling me, I got out the camera in this coffee shop and she just talked to the camera. So I captured all of that in spatial video. She was overjoyed. And the reason I mention that is because people today, even my mum included, who haven't grown up with cameras being in their face all the time, have got used to cameras capturing them. There's always someone out filming. Where, for example, we had previous iterations in technology where it might be Google Glass or something a bit weird, and no doubt it will be really weird if people walk around with Apple Vision Pros on their faces filming in public places. I think this is a great step. And so I've been capturing everything in spatial video, from journeys on the bus into London and the South Bank to family get-togethers. And so I'm wondering if you have began or if Thanksgiving is the perfect opportunity for you this weekend to begin.
Yeah, this really is the perfect time for me to start doing this. Of course, I've talked about how excited I am to be able to capture moments with my son in spatial video as he's hitting these milestones. And of course, at his age, every day is a new thing that he's learning. And so, yes, I'm getting on this as soon as I can, capturing all those memories in spatial video. And I'm just so excited that it's already here. Really is incredible. Now, for now, we're just playing back those videos normally on our iPhones. Of course, you can trim them and things like that in the Photos app. But we did receive news as a part of this whole spatial video rollout that Final Cut Pro is going to gain the ability to edit spatial video next year. And so you'll actually be able to go in, and we don't know exactly what kind of tweaks you'll be able to make, but it will gain support for that format and editing it fully next year.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what the limitations are with that, because if there aren't, and it is literally, you can do everything that you're used to being able to accomplish with 2D video in Final Cut, but now for spatial video, wow, are we in for a future, especially when it comes to filmmaking. Talking of filmmaking and 3D and spatial video, Of course, last week we got a hint that 3D films were indeed coming to the TV app and were already being populated within the TV app, ready for whenever that launch of Apple Vision Pro will be. We heard a number of titles, and of course that all disappeared from the TV app pretty quickly after being first reported by Rasmus over at Flat Panels HD. But it got me kind of digging into the weeds a little bit in terms of what was actually available in 3D, what is released in 3D theatrically, what has a physical release, what's had a digital release. And so I've been slowly putting together a catalogue of every film from the last probably 40 years that is available in 3D, and whether that was just theatrically or a physical release, because Disney actually release a lot of their films still in 3D. The Marvels from this past week is just the latest. We also saw that earlier this year with the animated Spider-Man film. And the thing that I found out, what I thought was really interesting here, was that the physical releases in 3D have been, up until now, limited to the full HD 1080p resolutions, which means that maybe we see more 1080p from that sense of things, as well as the memories that we're able to capture. And that might also be a bonus, because when it comes to what we're presuming to be the upgrade path for this, free upgrades like we have with 4K, of course, if you're in the US and you import movies into your TV app library through other retailers, thanks to Movies Anywhere, you'll no doubt have some films that are restricted to HD. Well, I'd imagine that those HD films will also get the benefit of their spatial video 3D counterparts. Just to give you a bit of a rundown very quickly of films that I have noticed that are available somewhere in 3D. Abominable, The Addams Family, the live action of Aladdin, The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the Avengers films, most of the Marvel films, alongside some really cool stuff like, for example, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, and honestly, a lot of films, not just superhero films and animated films, but mainly films that came out in the early 2000s and 2013, 2014, 2015, before 3D TVs kind of died out. Now, of course, all of these 3D masters are just floating around waiting to be used. So I would imagine that a lot of the studios are going to make that a priority. And we've already seen that with the leaked list of films that are coming, including, I think it was The Boss Baby Family Business from a couple of years ago. I mean, if you need a reason to watch it, you will. Also, creating this list, I just realised how many bad movies I have in my library, but I will be watching in 3D. So, the one I'm really, really excited for, though, is, of course, Martin Scorsese's 2011 3D film Hugo, starring Sacha Baron Cohen and Chloe Grace Moretz, amongst others. It's a great, great family film, and a really underrated Martin Scorsese film, who, of course, the master, known more for his crime films than his family-friendly features. So, yeah, really cool.
Well, that's a lot about Apple Vision Pro we've talked about. Let's talk about Apple TV a little bit. After all, this is an Apple TV podcast segment. This week saw the latest beta release of tvOS 17.2, and it features some TV app improvements, including an add to queue button during the pre-roll trailers before Apple Originals. And so now, when you're watching an Apple Original in the TV app, and they have a little pre-roll showing you what's coming or what just released this week on Apple TV Plus, it'll include a little button. If you want to, you can add that to your up next queue. And I believe it also shows the logo for whatever property you're watching as well. So if you don't necessarily know the title, or if you're just interested in learning more about it, you'll be able to go there and do that. Another interesting beta tidbit, Felipe Esposito at 9to5Mac reports that strings within the latest iOS 17.2 beta indicate that the iTunes Movie Store will be removed from the iTunes app and replaced with a message that says iTunes Movies moved to the Apple TV app. The change seems to be set to triggered remotely rather than via a software update, which might be why we haven't seen it yet in the beta. It's kind of lying in the background there, kind of waiting to pounce maybe when the public release is given out. Interesting move. Of course, we heard this rumored by Mark Gurman when he was talking about the big TV app redesign on the Apple TV. So far, we have not seen this come to fruition, but it seems like it might be being prepared for in the background. What do you think about this, Sigmund, and the possibility of this happening?
I mean, I'm nervous because, and we're seeing this even this week, right? The day that we're recording, Friday, there was a big release of Black Friday iTunes Store sales, including some complete box sets of TV shows, like one of your favorites, Devon, Community. Yeah. Available now for just under $25, which is really, really cool if that's something you want to own. Now, in the TV app, there is no such option to buy a complete box set. You have to buy season by season. So is that option going to get integrated before the iTunes apps go away, or is this something that's been overlooked? It feels like it's something we're just going to have to wait and see, and I do think there's going to be a couple of pains in this process. Not only that, you have the ability at the moment in iTunes Movies to actually see the resolution you own, as opposed to, of course, the highest quality presentation available within either streaming or for purchase. Then, of course, we have the user reviews, which aren't present in the TV app, but are in iTunes. And believe it or not, there is a community out there of digital movie collectors. If that wasn't to be introduced in the TV app before the retirement of iTunes TV shows and iTunes movies, I think that would be really, really sad. Again, I guess we'll just have to wait and see, Devon. Have been filing those feedbacks.
I think in our ideal scenario, this is an opportunity for Apple to really bring together the best of all these features under one umbrella in the TV app, rather than what we've had for years now, where you have this split between iTunes and Apple TV. Maybe I'm being a little bit overly optimistic, but I'd like to believe that as they're continuing to work on this redesign and improvement, that they'll integrate these features over, and we'll get that ideal world for film collectors to have all these features in the TV app where they want them.
Now, of course, I'm a movie watcher, but I also love a good movie soundtrack. And whilst you can find movie soundtracks amongst Apple Music's main app, I've got some good news for Apple Music Classical listeners that also just so happen to own iPads.
Yes, after several months of release of being an iPhone-only app, Apple Music Classical is now available on the iPad. Now, of course, before you could run it in compatibility mode and have the big black bars around it on your iPad, but now the iPad app features the full screen interface for classical music lovers, and of course it's also a great way to listen to a lot of film soundtracks. Apple Music Classical, it's a very focused experience. It's got some features that really help people nail down what version of a particular song or arrangement that they want to listen to. Now, of course, the app also includes some enhanced credits for these arrangements and albums. If you want to know who's playing a particular instrument, who did the direction on a particular arrangement, all of that is there. It's just a much more focused experience for classical music lovers. And that is a very passionate group of people, rivaled maybe only by the film lovers in the Apple world as well.
Yeah, I gotta say, I have been picking up the vinyls as they become available through different record companies. The Killers of the Flower Moon original soundtrack is, despite being a Paramount movie, coming out through Sony and their music division. There's no news yet, however, on the Napoleon soundtrack. And of course, Napoleon had its French and London premieres this past week. The London premiere actually happening only just last night, and funnily enough, I checked my email a little too late, Devon. An incredible premiere in Leicester Square. Unfortunately, I wouldn't have been able to make it anyway due to some prior engagements related to health. There was also an after party at the Chiltern Firehouse in London that evening, which is the same venue often hired out for parties post the BAFTA Awards. And it's really nice, actually, just to see the photos and see everything in full swing again, actors being able to promote their films. Now, we did get a roundup of reviews following these premieres. So unfortunately, because I didn't see the film this week, my review will be coming on next week's episode, post-Thanksgiving. But we did get a roundup of reviews from those that were in attendance earlier this week. And there's a few that I wanted to point out, starting with Jake Coyle of the Associated Press, who said, "Here is a sweeping historical tapestry. No one does it better today than Scott, with a damning, almost satirical portrait at its centre. That mix makes Napoleon a riveting off-kilter experience."
Hannah Strong at Little White Lies said Ridley Scott takes on the might of France's most famous son in predictably brash and thrilling style.
Whereas Matt Singer of Screen Crush said a twisted love story wrapped in a plodding war film, and Mike Reyes of Cinema Blend adding a picture that feels engaging and energetic but also incomplete when considering the big picture.
And finally, Brian Lowry at CNN says the film, while technically superb, feels like it wins several battles but doesn't entirely qualify as a success in terms of the overall war.
One of the things that I've heard about this is, first off, the performance from Vanessa Kirby steals the show, which is quite something, being a big Joaquin Phoenix fan, to hear. So I'm really looking forward to that performance. But also, a lot of people have been saying that the pacing is a little bit all over the place, which kind of makes sense because, of course, we're both waiting with bated breath for the extended 4-hour cut of the film. This cut coming to theatres is just over the 2.5-hour mark. So get comfy. I'm really, really looking forward to checking this out. I thought also the lengths to which Sony Pictures and Apple went to promote this film was beyond anything that I ever expected to see. It's been a couple of months since Killers of the Flower Moon released in theatres. I would expect, I'm not too sure what you think, for that to release in December, and maybe Ridley Scott's Napoleon to come out mid-January, maybe, because we haven't heard of a January film, but we have heard of a February film coming to Apple TV+. Beyond that being a 4-hour cut, I still cannot wait to check this out on the big screen. Do you have any plans as of yet?
It's a little tricky with a newborn, to try and get out to the movies. I did take him with me to see The Marvels last weekend, and he did great. But I'm not sure that Napoleon is a film I need to be bringing a baby to. So
no. Absolutely not.
But as soon as I can, I will be getting out and seeing it. I'm just like you. I'm so excited for this one, and I really do think the big screen is going to be the best place to see this one. Hopefully, when the extended cut comes out, there'll be showings of that in theaters as well. Now, if you are looking for a more family-friendly outing, Apple Original still does have you covered, because Spirited is going to be re-released in theaters on November 24th in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom and Ireland. Here's my question, Sigmund. Are they going to offer sing-along versions of the theatrical release? Because we know that a sing-along version is coming to Apple TV+. How fun would it be to sing Bringing Back Christmas alongside your fellow moviegoers?
Oh, I would absolutely adore it. I don't know how many people are going to be in touch with the songs just yet. But I do think this is a really cool second opportunity to see this film on the big screen. I feel like it fell under a lot of people's radars last year. But what I would say is you've got probably another week, Devon, until anyone catches on to you saying good afternoon to them. I know how passive-aggressive you can be,
Yeah, you can only use that insult for a little bit longer before it becomes just a very popular phrase and everyone knows exactly what you mean by it. So those are the big screen releases, but we've also got news of some smaller screen releases coming in February that we're both very much looking forward to. First of all, the new look will debut this Valentine's Day on Apple TV+. Inspired by true events and filmed exclusively in Paris, the new look centers on fashion designers Christian Dior, Coco Chanel, and their contemporaries as they navigated the horrors of World War II and launched modern fashion. Apple released first look photos of the series, including cast members Ben Mendelsohn, Juliette Binoche, Maisie Williams, John Malkovich, Emily Mortimer, and Claes Bang. We'll leave a link to that first look in the show notes. The photos look awesome, and I'm excited to hopefully see a trailer for this before too long.
Yeah, I think this is going to grab the attention of so many people, not just fashionistas, but fashion historians as well. It looks fantastic, and what a lovely, lovely surprise. Now, we did also get some news on something that I think is going to be more for a different audience. The Dynasty New England Patriots. We got a debut teaser trailer of the upcoming 10-part series from Imagine Documentaries and Emmy-winning filmmaker Matthew Hammercheck, featuring unprecedented access to the New England Patriots, based on the critically acclaimed New York Times best-selling book by author Jeff Benedict. Here's a clip of what to expect.
And the Patriots have won their 6th Super Bowl title. Don't ever count Tom Brady out.
Bill Belichick's painted his Mona Lisa.
These are the two titanic figures of this franchise. But they are two alphas. That collision was inevitable.
We were coming near the end. And I was just trying to hold it together the best I could.
Now, Devon, this is produced by Imagine Documentaries, executive produced by Brian Grazer, Ron Howard, Sarah Bernstein, Justin Wilkes, and Jeff Benedict, along with Matthew Hammercheck, who of course is directing. Miranda Johnson-Smith, Meredith Coulthers, and Jonah McLaughlin are co-executive producers. This also comes from the same production company that brought us the Supermodels earlier this year. Again, very, very different, this one. Releasing, I think, at the timely time, right? Just after Super Bowl, which also has Apple connotations, being that the Apple Music Super Bowl halftime is going to be headlined by Usher this year, which is really, really cool. What was your take on this trailer? I know you're not an American football fan, but what about the drama behind it all?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? People love their sports, but what they really love is the behind-the-scenes action of everything. And there's no one more dramatic within the world of football than Tom Brady himself. People either love him or they love to hate him. And I think whichever side of that line you fall on, you're going to be interested in this story and learning more about it. This really does appeal to a totally different audience than what a lot of the Apple Originals that we talk about appeals to. I think this can draw in a lot of people. This continues the trend of what we've talked about before of Apple pushing more and more into the unscripted space, especially the sports unscripted space. And this is interesting because it's almost got that Apple prestige to it as well. It's very exclusive. It's a really big story that they're covering here, and something I think that's going to draw in a lot of people, sports fans. And again, whether they love the Patriots or love to hate the Patriots, I think this is one that people are going to tune into.
Yeah, Devon, looking forward to finding out what was involved in the breakup. Of course, a breakup of another relationship that we're going to find out a little bit more about through a really weird request by US Congress, of all people. The same people that brought you How Does Facebook Work with Mark Zuckerberg. Tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Lawmakers are questioning Apple on whether concerns about China played a role in the end of the relationship between Apple and Jon Stewart. And of course, the ending of the problem with Jon Stewart. This is really interesting. We saw when the New York Times reported on this story at the beginning, they said that Jon Stewart was trying to cover China in some way that Apple wasn't comfortable with, and that led to his show ending. Now, there's been further reporting that indicated that maybe it wasn't quite as dramatic as it might have seemed at the beginning, but apparently someone on the House of Representatives Select Committee on Competition with the Chinese Communist Party read that article, it piqued their interest, and now they are asking Apple to come and do a briefing with them by December 15th. So quite a quick deadline to come and explain themselves. Why did they cancel Jon Stewart's show? Maybe someone on the committee just really loved the show and wants some answers. I don't know. It does seem like they're taking this very seriously. I'm going to read a quote from their letter to Apple. They say, if these reports, referring to the reports about Apple canceling the show over China, are accurate, it potentially speaks to broader concerns about indirect Chinese Communist Party influence over the creative expression of American artists and companies on CCP-related topics. It also highlights an additional reason beyond the traditionally cited national security rationales why we encourage Apple to accelerate its efforts to reduce its dependence on the People's Republic of China in its core businesses. So actually, that kind of took a really sharp turn there, right? In Deadline's reporting of this letter, they seem to be quite concerned with the effect of the relationship between China and media companies and its impact on artistic expression in the United States, and the ways that especially up-and-coming creators aren't able to write certain stories, have certain things made because these companies aren't interested in touching certain topics concerning China. My question on all of this is, what is this committee practically going to do about this, even if it turns out to be true, which I think actually that whole situation is more complicated than just he wanted to do a story on China, so Apple shut him down. But it's been a problem for every media company at some point, even based on some of the apology videos that sometimes actors have to put out based on the way they market their films and sometimes say things the wrong way. They really they need that Chinese audience. They need to stay in good with the Chinese government. It's just a thorny problem, and not one that I think is going to be solved easily by hearing with Apple. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any consequences from this, or if this is just kind of something they're looking into. I mean, it's good that we have people who are keeping an eye on this sort of thing because it is an important issue. Again, I just question practically with how just interwoven our world is, right? And what a superpower China is and the influence that it has on so many businesses. Is there really anything that can be done about this, even if it does turn out to be true? We'll keep an eye out. If Apple does respond to this committee, we'll see what happens. We'll be sure to report on it. Well, moving from a series of potential hearings that we would look forward to seeing if they do come to fruition to a series that we know is coming, Sigmund, you've been working on some articles about a very fun topic. I've gotten some behind the scenes of some of the stuff that you've been doing with Home Assistant and Apple TV, and I just have to say, I cannot wait to read more about what you're doing and how you're doing it. Can you give us a little bit of a preview of this series and what we can expect?
Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun, as we've talked about previously, with Home Assistant and its integrations with Apple TV. And the main reason for this is because of the lack of integrations within Apple's Home app when it comes to Apple TV. I think there's a suggestion for just turning off the Apple TV when everyone leaves the house, for example. That's pretty much it. And I've wanted to do some complicated stuff for a while that is available with a little bit of tinkering. And I really have delved into the world of Home Assistant and its integration with Apple TV. Now, these articles are a long time coming, and I'm doing it in parts. The main reason for that is because I'm trying to be as clear as possible with every step, because I won't have the time to help every single person with their specific integrations. This is the fun I've been having, Devon, and again, you've seen some of it, only some of it, but I'm going to tell you about all of it now. So, I've been able to master being able to turn lights down when playback begins, bring up the lights when you pause, for example, and you can have that change to a completely different scene. Even gone as far as being able to trigger your personal focus modes on iOS within automations. The only limitation is that you have to interact with the notification that comes up on your iOS device, but that's not something that I ever thought was going to be possible, but it is. But the first part is going to focus on how to set up that integration with Apple TV. It's pretty easy. Where it gets a little bit complicated is, especially for those that aren't used to coding, is where the spaces go within the YAML, which I think is the easiest way of being able to set up an automation once you've done it a few times. But the biggest part is going to be setting up how the Apple TV is able to tell Home Assistant what's actually playing on the Apple TV. That is not part of the integration that's baked into Home Assistant. There's a little bit of work there that needs to be done in a configuration file with an add-on. It's all going to be detailed.
That all sounds super interesting, Sigmund, but I'm wondering, why would you want the Apple TV to tell Home Assistant what's playing?
Good question. Unfortunately, you can't do it per title, although you can create automations specific to each title. But the Apple TV can tell Home Assistant what app is being played back or is active on any given Apple TV in the home. And the reason why you would do that is, for example, say you're watching a live stream of a specific show that airs at a specific time. You could have the automation start a sequence that syncs up with the intro of a given show. For example, Strictly Come Dancing on BBC One on a Saturday or a Sunday night. You could have a disco ball maybe starting. You could have the lights turning pink. You could do lots. But specific to each film or each on-demand show, when you have an intro, especially at the beginning of a film, for example, the blockbuster Barbie or even Oppenheimer from this year, they have some really interesting intros with some really interesting colours. You could set a sequence to be able to go in sync with that before the lights all dim down and you're now immersed in your film. So there's lots of different things that you can play with, and you can go as far out as you want to, because there really are no limitations to what is possible. One thing that I think you're going to love, because you're actually more into shortcuts than I am. I'm often sending you messages via iMessage saying, how do I do this again? Because the language within shortcuts confused me for a little while. I feel like I've got on top of that since I started converting all of my Home Assistant automations into shortcuts as well. And my initial idea for that was to create buttons that would automatically switch to a specific channel using TV Launcher, or buttons that will play back specific titles either within the TV app or, get this, third-party apps, being able to skip that annoying third-party profile picker that we keep complaining about because of their lack of integration with Apple's user profile platform. So there are lots and lots of different things that can be achieved through Home Assistant. Really looking forward to it. The one issue with shortcuts, though, as I'm sure you'll be aware, is you create a complex shortcut. That's great. You can share one or two of those to a family member. If you want all of these automations to work via shortcuts, suddenly, in my case at least, you've got hundreds of automations that you're having to send over, then approve them one by one, turn off the notification for each, and just go wild, right? That's going to take a lot of time. And then also, if, for example, you've got guests, maybe a babysitter. So I've been thinking about the integration of physical media and software and automations via NFC. Of course, you could do this all on an iPhone via shortcuts, but again, you have that problem of multiple shortcuts and having to copy them and having to manage it all. Instead, I've created automations via NFC tags that run through Home Assistant via a centralized NFC reader that's just on the work surface next to the television or in the home cinema, as the case may be for some listeners. And that's worked brilliantly. Now, you could integrate that with programmable cards, but also if you're a fan of physical media, but you've kind of given up on the physical media age because you've gone completely digital, you could, of course, put an NFC sticker within your physical media case or even maybe your vinyl records to get playback of your favorite albums on Apple Music or Apple Music Classical. So there's just a ton of different things that we're going to be going through. I'm really, really excited about this. And I think this is going to be the perfect project for people between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So there are a number of items you're going to need. So I thought we'd go over those very quickly. From the position of how I'm doing this via a Raspberry Pi. So you'll need one of those, either a Raspberry Pi 3 or 4, an SD card, Apple TVs, of course, smart lights, and an iOS device, of course, running the latest software, and then later on a centralized networked NFC reader for those fun little touches that we'll hopefully get to do as well together. That's a lot, Devon, to take in. What are your thoughts? I know there are a few things that I hadn't shared with you previously. So what are you most looking forward to and surprise?
Yeah, this is all super exciting to me, especially when you mentioned getting past those third-party profile pickers. I'm like, okay, just give me the secret to that now. But of course, I'll be reading the series of articles to get to it because there are steps to get there. Home Assistant has always been interesting to me, but it's always been kind of an enigma because I've never totally understood how you even run it. And so I'm excited that you're going to start there, help people get that set up. And I'd never thought about connecting it to the Apple TV until you started doing it. And it's just incredible the depth that you're able to go to. So yeah, I'm excited for all of it, especially going straight to titles instead of going to the third-party profile picker. I think that's going to be awesome. So I will be following along with that series for sure. And of course, we invite everyone to follow along as well. We'll be sharing more on that as the articles come out over the coming weeks. It's going to be a great holiday project for a lot of people. It's going to be a great holiday project. I think a lot of our listeners who are super into the Apple TV and maybe a little bit automation nerds like us will be really, really into this. Now, another thing I'm really looking forward to, Sigmund, is award season. Now that the strikes are over, we can finally get back to honoring all of the creators of these great series and films that we enjoy so much. And we're starting to see some of those awards rolling out already. I think we'll see more of that towards the beginning of next year. But recently, the winners of the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards were announced, and we had a couple of Apple originals that did well there. First of all, Still racked in several awards, including Best Documentary Feature, Best Director, Best Editing, Best Narration, and Best Biographical Documentary. I just have to say, well-deserved on every front. What a great film. Really made a splash this year. So happy that the creators of that film are being honored in that way. So congratulations to them. Also, an Apple original that we have yet to see, Lennon, Murder Without a Trial, won Best True Crime Documentary. So it's winning awards before it's even had a public release, which bodes well. So we will definitely be looking out for that one as it comes to Apple TV Plus in the near future. But it's not just films and TV shows that are receiving awards. This is also the time of year when a lot of different publications will put out their end of the year app winner awards. Of course, we know that Mike Hurley and Jason Snell are putting together the Upgradies right now. If anyone feels so compelled to upgrade their favorite Apple TV podcast for an upgradie, we wouldn't complain about that. But Apple also put out their App Store Awards finalists for this year, and we wanted to highlight some of those. The nominees for Apple TV App of the Year Award are Bugsnax from Young Horses, FitOn, and Mubi. So a good selection there between a game, a fitness app, and a very prestige film streaming app. It'll be interesting to see which one of those takes the award. And then in the Apple Arcade category, the Game of the Year finalists are Cityscapes from PlayStack, Hello Kitty Island Adventure from Sunblink, and Stitch from Leica Guard. Stitch, I believe, won last year for the inclusivity category. So very cool to see it come back around. The winners will be announced later this month. And of course, nominees for all categories will be linked in the show notes, so you can check out the full list of finalists for Apple's App Store Awards for this year.
Let's talk about this week's Apple TV releases now, starting with Apple Arcade. Downwell Plus from Devolver Digital, one of my favorite independent game publishers. This is an action platformer where you play as a young person venturing further and further down a well with only your gun boots for protection. I gotta say, just the premise of this is scary. We've talked about claustrophobia before. Knowing the kind of artwork style, I think I'm gonna be okay with this one, Devon. This is, of course, a procedurally generated game. So every level is going to be different each time you try this, and a new experience will evolve from that, and is available on iPhone and iPad, which of course you can AirPlay to the big screen with just a couple of taps. Now, whilst we continue to go down the well, I think we're going to have to continue going down the rabbit hole as well. The rabbit hole, of course, that is The Pirate of Prague, a new Apple original podcast that debuted this past week, with the first episode hosted by Joe Nocera of the Shrink Next Door fame. I love his presenting style. This is by far my favourite Apple original so far, just because of his delivery and the intersplicing of his narration and the conversations he's able to capture during his reporting. It's just brilliant stuff. Highly, highly recommended. Of course, MLS Season Pass is still available as we head to the end now of the playoffs, which will culminate at the beginning of next month. But whilst it takes a break, I've been trying to build my dream MLS team in the EAFC following this past week's MLS Awards, which you can check out in full along with all of the rundowns of each category. Really cool little video highlight packages and a nice little mini series that you can continue in short bites via your Up Next queue. Some controversy, I think, on Save of the Year this year. And what I found really funny was the Goal of the Year video package, because it was like watching two sports. Some goals scored on grass, some on AstroTurf. And I don't know if you've ever played soccer at all, or if you've played soccer on AstroTurf compared to grass. On AstroTurf, you are not diving in for a sliding challenge without scraping up your whole leg. So that doesn't happen as much, and therefore certain players get more space than others. I found it fascinating as we come to the end of the first season of MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. Of course, though, this week is dominated by Apple originals, starting with, of course, our highlight of the week, the 2-episode premiere of Monarch Legacy of Monsters, alongside new episodes of For All Mankind, and the penultimate episode of Lessons in Chemistry, which we will be offering our thoughts on next week. But what have we got happening on Wednesday? Because from my understanding, we've got quite a bumper release on Wednesday due to a certain holiday.
Yes, with next Thursday being Thanksgiving, Apple are giving us a little treat early, releasing a ton of Apple originals on Wednesday. Not only the originals that we were expecting on Wednesday, but also all the episodes that we would expect next Friday will actually be coming 2 days early. So your Up Next queue is going to be nice and full on Wednesday. Of course, in theaters, we got the debut of Ridley Scott's Napoleon. And then on Apple TV Plus, we'll see the premiere of Hannah Waddingham, Home for Christmas. If you want a little preview of that, you can stream Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas on the Apple TV YouTube channel right now. We'll link that in the show notes as well. Wednesday, we'll also see the premiere of Family Holiday Special, The Velveteen Rabbit, as well as the premiere of The Making of Spirited. New episodes of The Buccaneers, Monarch, and For All Mankind, and the finale of Lessons in Chemistry. So a lot to stream over your Thanksgiving holiday. Of course, you'll have a couple extra days in there, hopefully, after celebrating with family to catch up. Plenty and plenty to watch. As if that weren't enough, we've got some great extras for you this week as well, including a new Time to Walk session with David Oyelowo, an iPhone 15 Pro ad called On With The Show that highlights the new camera features of the iPhone 15 Pro, and a new duet between Hannah Waddingham and Jason Sudeikis. This is not a part of her Christmas special, but the two of them did get together for a nice rendition of a Lady Gaga song, and we'll link that in the show notes so you can listen as well. Now, on top of all of that, as if you're not going to be busy enough next week, Sigmund, we always end the show with our up next picks for people to stream on Apple TV as well. So what have you got for us this week?
Oh, so I have 2 films and an app for you this week. The first, of course, is Oppenheimer from Christopher Nolan. This is coming to the Apple TV app finally on November 21st. It stars Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, and Robert Downey Jr., who I think is pretty certain to get supporting actor at whatever award ceremony comes next year. It is a breathtaking global phenomenon that captivated audiences around the world earlier this year, written for the screen, thrusting audiences into the mind of physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, whose landmark work on the Manhattan Project created the first atomic bomb. An unprecedented cinematic event. Highly, highly recommend checking this out. It is a long one at 3 hours, but honestly, I think if you have even a minute interest in this story and the history behind it, I think it's going to be something that will captivate everyone. And of course, this is the second part to the Oppenzilla weekend. Yes, you didn't think I was going to forget that one, Devon. So highly, highly recommended Oppenheimer in the TV app. My other pick is The Creator. This is a sci-fi from Gareth Edwards, the director behind Rogue One, and this really cool indie film called Monsters from quite a while back, alongside 2014's Godzilla, which he was involved in. This is a story about a future war between the human race and the forces of artificial intelligence, starring John David Washington as Joshua, a hardened ex-Special Forces agent grieving the disappearance of his wife, who is recruited to hunt down and kill the Creator, the elusive architect advanced AI, who has developed a mysterious weapon with the power to end the war and humankind. However, when Joshua finds this advanced AI weapon, he finds out that, in fact, it is in the form of a young child. And this asks so many really interesting questions. It's shot beautifully. And for those that don't know, film budgets have spiraled out of control. Something as grand as this, when you have a look at the trailer, I think you're going to be blown away to find out that this was all made on quite a tight budget compared to, say, your Star Wars or your big action or sci-fi films at $80 million, and was shot on relatively accessible cameras. The Sony's FX3, which is like a $3,000 camera, of course, paired with some incredible lenses and lighting and rigging, as we talked about with Apple's most recent event. But when you see what was achieved, I think you're going to be absolutely blown away and inspired to maybe get out the most recent iPhone and try and copy some of the shots that were captured in this film with the Blackmagic app, which is my app pick of the week for iOS. This was the app that did indeed shoot the most recent Apple event, the Scary Fast event, which of course we got a little bit of background on how everything was shot. The Blackmagic app, which is free, actually got quite a sizable update this week. So alongside all of the manual controls and the cloud syncing to Blackmagic's cloud suite, alongside the ability to shoot horizontal whilst holding your phone vertically, little things like this that I think are going to be really, really helpful for maybe filmmakers trying to get angles in really tight situations. Lots added this week. We've got control dials now offering haptic feedback and higher accuracy, support for 6 additional languages including Chinese, Japanese and Spanish, improved layouts for iPhones with display zoom enabled, improved animations for player and slate views in all iPhone models, improved animations for stealth mode in smaller iPhone models, improved organization and grouping of camera settings, support for selecting a specific onboard microphone, maintaining zebra, peaking and false color during recording, flipping the image for SLR lenses if you're going that hardcore, support for flicker-free shutter presets for 50 and 60 hertz settings, which actually may just be really helpful if you're using your iPhone with continuity camera. I don't know if that integration's available, but I know with certain lights there could be a bit of an issue there for people in Europe and the camera settings. Support for recording clips with a LUT and then tagging the color space, which is going to be really, really helpful for quick post-production turnarounds. Export and import camera setting presets. Improved grid controls and horizontal detection, selectable time-lapse duration in settings, the ability to drag clips between projects in the media panel, which again is just mind-blowing to me. Support for iOS shortcut automation workflows, which I think is the big one there for a lot of people, alongside the ability for Apple Log to record 709 LUT and the ability to turn off uploads when on data, and of course general performance and stability improvements. And the most insane thing about this, and I don't know if I said it before, but I'll say it again, this app is free.
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. First of all, just all the capabilities that are built into the app to help you take the most advantage of the iPhone camera to get professional video off of it and make professional films and TV shows. But the fact that it's free, that it's an app that's been used by Apple, just really great work here. Definitely worth checking out. And something that I think anyone who's aspiring to become a filmmaker or to make TV shows or anything of that nature, this is definitely a tool you need to be playing with because it's being used at the highest levels of filmmaking. And it's one that you can learn right now on the device you have in your pocket for free, which is pretty amazing. I've got 2 picks this week as well. One a series and one an app. For some reason, we both have app picks this week, which is kind of cool. But I'll start with my series pick. And you had to know I was going to talk about this one this week, Sigmund. It's Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. We talked before that Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is my favorite movie of all time. And after I saw the film, I actually went back and read the series of graphic novels by Brian Lee O'Malley that the movie's based on. And I thought while reading the books, you know who would do a great adaptation of this is Netflix. I love the film. I love everything about it, but there's so much in the books that, of course, you can't fit into a 2-hour movie. And so now Netflix has done the thing that I always wanted them to do, and they've ordered a new adaptation called Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It's created by Brian Lee O'Malley and Ben David Grabinski, but this is the thing that makes me the most excited, Sigmund, is that they got the entire original cast from the film back to do this series. It's an anime adaptation of Scott Pilgrim, which of course is a perfect medium for this series. And I'm just so excited. The cast of this film back in 2010 feels miraculous now looking back on it, but it was before so many of these people were huge. I think Michael Cera was already on the rise, but you've got Mary Elizabeth Winstead, you got Chris Evans, Anna Kendrick, Brie Larson, Allison Pill, Aubrey Plaza, Brandon Ruth, and so many others. And the fact that they were able to get this entire cast back together all these years later to revisit this project that so many people love, it's just so exciting. So it covers, of course, the same general story as the film did. Scott Pilgrim falls in love with Rona Flowers and has to fight her 7 evil exes in order to win her heart. But this explores so much more of the world of Scott Pilgrim, not only from the books, but there's also some new material in the series as well. This is one of those properties that just continues to evolve as its creator, Brian Lee O'Malley, continues to revisit it. And it's just incredible. I'm so excited. This is one of those best of all possible world scenarios for me, Sigmund. This is a film and a cast that I love so much, and I can't wait to jump back into this world. The series released this weekend on Netflix. It's 8 episodes. I don't know how quickly I'm going to be able to get through this, but I'm going to do it as quickly as I possibly can because I just cannot wait to see Scott Pilgrim Takes Off.
Savor it, Devon. Savor it. I got to say, my trip to Toronto last year just turned into a tour of the different spots in Scott Pilgrim. That's what I was interested in. Forget your history. Just show me all of the different places in Scott Pilgrim. I absolutely love the film. Cannot wait to check this out. Yes, I will be resubscribing to Netflix just for this. A great, great pick. Now, Devon, you said that you have an app pick. And of course, anyone that knows you and keeps in touch with what you do beyond the podcast will know devondundee.com and your musings. Some really, really great writing over on your website. This week, you highlighted a particular app that I know has helped you a lot when it comes to all of the show notes you put together whilst I'm editing the podcasts weekly. Tell me about it.
Yes, this app is called Bridges. It's from developer Jonathan Ruiz, and it's one that I have been taking a lot of advantage of when putting together the show notes for this show. Every time you hear us say, we will link that in the show notes, what you don't see is that I start frantically tracking down that URL and immediately saving it into Bridges before I forget. Because what this app does is it allows you to save, organize, and share links. And there's lots of link saving apps out there and lots of great ones. But what this one does that's so different from any other app that I've tried is that it allows you to very easily get those links out once they're saved in there. It's not just a place to keep them forever, it's a place to use them. And so, especially for people like me who put together podcast show notes every week, there's lots of links in there. That's mostly what the notes are for. It's to refer people to what we're talking about so they can check out all these awesome films and series and articles and everything else that we talk about. And so what I do in Bridges is I have a folder for each segment of the show, and I'll just save, okay, this is this week's releases. I'll go to the Apple TV app and I will share each of those releases into Bridges. And then when it's time to assemble the show notes, what I can do in Bridges is go to that folder and there's a button that just says copy all. And I can copy those links in whatever format works best for the way I'm putting together the show notes, whether that be hyperlinks, whether that be Markdown, whether that be HTML. And then I can just go paste those into wherever I'm assembling the show notes. So it's a great app. If you save a lot of links, if you're the type of person who does a lot of read later type stuff, or if you're assembling notes for a podcast, a newsletter, a blog, anything like that, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's available on iPhone, iPad, and Mac, and there's 2 versions of it. The iPhone, iPad version is $4. The Mac version is $4, so you can kind of pick your platform. But it's paid up front. Really, really well done. It's something I have enjoyed using throughout its test flight. It's really helped me out a lot, and I couldn't buy it quickly enough when it did hit the App Store this week. I highly recommend checking out Bridges, of course, linked in the show notes via the Bridges app itself.
A very, very cool app suggestion there. And some great picks. I will say, I think Bridges is actually probably going to be quite handy for those setting up automations via Home Assistant for specific titles. So definitely something to add to your arsenal for when that time comes. Well, Devon, I think that is where we end this episode this week. Of course, we welcome your feedback through Apple Podcasts. Your reviews and ratings help more than you ever know. You can, of course, contact both of us via social media with the links in the show notes as usual, as well as email the show or send us an iMessage to mrolfm@screentimes.net. We will, of course, be back next week for episode 99 with a post-Thanksgiving look at Napoleon and the Velveteen Rabbit. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your family from Devon and I. But also, don't forget, there is a fitness app just waiting to be tapped after all of that turkey.